we have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
When you consider whether or not you believe the New World Order plans to genocide away 90% of the Earth's population is a hoax or not, consider the Georgia Guidestones. The Georgia Guidestones are mostly unknown to the people in the United States. They're an important link to the occult hierarchy that dominates the world we live in. And we don't know exactly who built it. There are 10 guides or commandments engraved in these stones in 8 languages. These are the guides. Maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. Unite humanity with a new living language. Rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. Protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. Let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. Avoid petty laws and useless officials. Balance personal rights with social duties. Prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. Be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. Limiting the population of the earth to 500 million will require the extermination of 9/10 of the world's population.
We've got to stabilize the population. When I was born, there were
so what's wrong with the population? I mean,
with too many people. That's why we have global warming. We have global warming because too many people are using too much stuff. But if there were less people, they'd be using less stuff.
Mr. Turner, I was wondering if you think it's a good idea to reduce 90% of the population because we are being overpopulated by a lot of... 90%. 80? Prince Philip said 80, sir. I go with 85.
I think 2 billion is about right.
Right, me too. Thank you.
One-child family.
Exactly. One-child policy.
Ken, can you speak about your population control, saying you want to reduce the population to 95%? Extermination? You said you want a one-child policy, but you have 5 kids. Doesn't make any sense.
The youngest one is 40 years old.
All right, but understand.
The world population then was 3 million.
But that's what the Nazis did with eugenics, sir. They wanted to destroy humanity.
Pay detail.
You don't got to tell you. I'm not even doing nothing wrong. Can you tell me what I did wrong?
You don't have permission here.
Yes, I do. I'm a legitimate person. I'm on the list, so I'm not even doing nothing illegal.
You talk to the management.
All right. Ted Turner, you're an enemy of humanity, and your Nazi-like policies won't be tolerated. I don't want to give you any trouble. I'm just trying to ask my questions, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm leaving, okay? Don't worry about that. Why do you want to destroy humanity, sir? You're an enemy of humanity.
Why do you support eugenics?
The Nazis support eugenics too. I'm on a public sidewalk, and you cannot touch me. No, this is a public sidewalk. Get
Sir,
I'm just talking to him.
I got to step to the back.
So what'd you do at the Bilderberg group? That's where you decided your eugenics policies?
Why do you support depopulation, Ted?
Is it when the Bilderberg? Just like the Nazis did, exterminated the Jews with eugenics. You're doing the same thing nowadays, trying to exterminate the normal people.
Is 80% depopulation enough? Is 80% enough? 90%? And who's going to decide who lives and dies?
Be ashamed of yourself. You are not our leader. National sovereignty will prevail, and we will not have a new world order. We won't have a one world government. The elite won't be in charge because the people and national sovereignty will always prevail, sir.
Eugenics is no laughing matter, sir. Depopulation is no laughing matter.
Your silence shows complicity, sir.
Ted, who's going to decide who lives and dies over your eugenics population program?
You're no better than a Nazi. On leaving Microsoft, Bill Gates bought $23 million of Monsanto shares. Globally, he now promotes GMOs and a vaccines collection he calls the solution for the world. Gates has been recorded explaining this solution is actually to cut the world's population.
Now, the world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. The density in the poor areas is greater than they can grow the food. The benefits there in terms of reducing the population growth.
The only vaccines that reduce the population, notes the site Prison Planet, are ones that sterilize people. The BBC says his foundation's funding big sterilization programs such as this one that blasts men's scrotums with ultrasound to damage the sperm. Here, Gates actually calls for the so-called death panels to decide whether folks should live or whether, as he puts it, they have no benefit whatsoever.
And a lack of willingness to say, you know, is spending $1 million on that last 3 months of life for that patient, would it be better to see which ones actually have no benefit whatsoever? But that's called the death panel, and you're not supposed to have that discussion.
Anthony Gates actually brags he's doing God's work. The boss of Goldman Sachs said exactly the same thing while sending millions into starvation. What the heck is going on?
His father was one of the main grandfathers of the whole entire eugenics movement here inside the United States. And it's still going strong today.
My dad was head of Planned Parenthood, and it was very controversial.
And Bill Gates is here once again pushing the GMOs and everything else that is also reducing the population, because that's what he says. If we do a good enough job with vaccinations and everything, we'll be able to reduce the population. The polio vaccines now are the #1 cause of polio. There's no question that Bill Gates is not doing God's work. And if he is doing God's work, I would ask, which God?
Yeah, how have we moved to open plans to take away our water, hoarding food, and population controls?
They speak to us as if we are peon peasants in medieval times, and they are the kings, queens, and nobles. Why did they target the low-income portions?
Yeah, May 25th, over 2 million people across 48 states and 6 continents marched against Monsanto. What do you make of the company refusing to talk to us because we covered the march?
They can't stand up to the facts. They wouldn't come on this show. I would love to debate a Monsanto employee and show them that email. I mean, what would they say? They have nothing. They go into these poor communities and then, of course, reduced yields. So what happens to these farmers? They end up killing themselves by drinking the biopesticides that Monsanto gave them. So every 30 minutes, while we've been talking, someone has killed themselves.
Execs now boast about infertility from GMOs, hoard food, and say water shouldn't be a human right. Monsanto has publicly stated it wants to control 100% of the world's food supply. The government isn't stopping them, so who will?
On August 18th, at the Ramada Hotel in central Jerusalem, leading Israeli rabbis gathered to defend the publication of a book by one of their peers that cited rabbinic sources to justify the killing of non-Jews, including innocent children and families.
לא רק אנחנו הדתיים התנגדנו, גם החילונים, אותם שהם שומרי מסורת, כולם התנגדו לחוק. הסיבה הייתה פשוטה. כולנו אומרים בהגדה של פסח, שפוך חמתך אל הגויים, אשר לא ידעוך על ממלכות אשר בשמך לא קראו, כי אכל את יעקב ואת נבל ושמו, שפוך עליהם זעמך, אחרון אפיך ישיגם, תרדוף באף ותשמידם מתחת שמי השם. שאלנו אותם, אתם לא רוצים להגיד בליל הסדר את ההגדה? יש מישהו שרוצה לעקור את האמירה של התנ"ך, את האמירה של התורה בתורה שבכתב או בתורה שבעל פה?
ואני חושב שהכנס הזה והדברים ההגיוניים האלה ייכנסו לאוזניים וללבבות המתאימים, ומה שהיה כאן נקווה שזה חלף ולא נצטרך להתכנס יותר בנושאים מסוג זה.
הרב, אם אתם תעשו את העבודה, what happened here, what this was a chilul kvod haTorah. It was a desecration of the Torah. The Torah is a Torah of peace, darkei noam, and what we heard here was that most of the people didn't read the book, and they said what's important is the atzmaut haTorah, is that nobody should criticize anybody who writes anything about it, especially if he's a Rav. And what we're saying is we've read the book, we know what the book says. The book calls for killing innocent children. There's no fine distinctions made here. It's a book of racist statements in the name of the Torah.
כחיוב של מסירות נפש בבחינת ייהרג ואל יעבור לגבי כפייה בניגוד לקיומה של תורה הוא לא בלבד לגבי גויים שבאים מכפייה נגד קיומה של תורה אלא הוא הדין גם בכפייה של יהודים מאיזה צד שהוא. לפני 50 שנה
But there is such a concept in Jewish law as any population, and under very, very specific circumstances, according to various rabbinic opinions, it would be seemingly permissible to kill children.
Is a lie. Now comes your moment of truth. You've played roulette with other people's lives. Today, you play with your own.
Admire Margaret Sanger enormously. Her courage, her tenacity, her vision. I am really in awe of her. I admire Margaret Sanger enormously. Her courage, her tenacity, her vision. I am really in awe of her.
Donald has said he's in favor of defunding Planned Parenthood. He even supported shutting the government down to defund Planned Parenthood. I will defend Planned Parenthood. I will defend Roe v. Wade, and I will defend women's rights to make their own health care decisions. And we have come too far to have that turned back now. And indeed, he said women should be punished, that there should be some form of punishment for women who obtain abortions. And I could just not be more opposed to that kind of thinking.
How far you believe the right to abortion goes. You have been quoted as saying that the fetus has no constitutional rights. You also voted against a ban on late-term partial birth abortions. Why?
Because Roe v. Wade very clearly sets out that there can be regulations on abortion so long as the life and the health of the mother are taken into account. And when I voted as a senator, I did not think that that was the case. The kinds of cases that fall at the end of pregnancy are often the most heartbreaking, painful decisions for families to make. I have met with women who, toward the end of their pregnancy, get the worst news one could get, that their health is in jeopardy if they continue to carry to term, or that something terrible has happened or just been discovered about the pregnancy. I do not think the United States government should be stepping in and making those most personal of decisions. So you can regulate if you are doing so with the life and the health of the mother taken into account.
Mr. Trump, your reaction, and particularly on this issue of late-term partial birth
Well,
abortion.
I think it's terrible. If you go with what Hillary is saying, in the 9th month, you can take the baby and rip the baby out of the womb of the mother just prior to the birth of the baby. Now, you can say that that's okay, and Hillary can say that that's okay, but it's not okay with me. Because based on what she's saying and based on where she's going and where she's been, you can take the baby and rip the baby out of the womb in the 9th month, on the final day and that's not acceptable.
The federal government already funnels hundreds of millions of dollars to Planned Parenthood every year, so it should come as no surprise when it funnels your money to celebrate its founder. The Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery recently opened a new, federally funded exhibit that, according to the museum's curator, celebrates women who have challenged and changed America over the past century. Included in the list is notorious liberal feminist Margaret Sanger. The National Portrait Gallery website provides a brief description of Sanger, describing a concerned crusader who fought with the courage of a wounded tiger for the promotion of birth control. What the Smithsonian exhibit fails to mention, however, is that Margaret Sanger founded the largest abortion chain in the country, now known as Planned Parenthood. But the exhibit also fails to explain the racist ideology behind Sanger's promotion of birth control. Many people don't really know what eugenics is. Eugenics is defined as belief in the possibility of improving the qualities of the human species by discouraging reproduction by persons having genetic defects or presumed to have inheritable, undesirable traits. Essentially, eugenics is the creation of a master race by controlling who has children and who doesn't. An article appearing in the January 31st, 1922 edition of the New York Times bore the headline, "Mrs. Sanger says Superman is the aim of birth control." If creating a race of supermen is the goal, who did Sanger believe had genetic defects or undesirable traits that stood in the way? In his book, Birth Control, Facts and Responsibilities, Adolf Meyer quoted an essay Sanger wrote in 1925, entitled, "The Need of Birth Control in America."
What point does someone have constitutional rights? And are you saying that a child on its due date, just hours before delivery, still has no constitutional rights?
Under our law, that is the case.
I've been against Hyde for years because I think it deprives low-income women from being able to access the full range of reproductive health services. And I don't think that's fair or appropriate. I would want to do more to, number one, expand the services that Planned Parenthood provides. I'm obviously not only against defunding Planned Parenthood, but I would like to see Planned Parenthood even get more funding because oftentimes it is both the first and the last resort. So we will have to do whatever we can to provide access to quality, affordable health care that includes the full range of reproductive health, including safe and legal abortion.
I know that women of color often rely more on government-funded health care than do white women. I'm wondering if you can tell me what other steps you could take to make abortion access available to more women of color.
Very clear that for women of color, Planned Parenthood is the go-to place.
In her praise for the eugenics programs in Germany, Sanger called for the implementation of such programs in the United States, specifically targeting African Americans. The following editorial was published in the 1932 issue of the Birth Control Review.
The Negro problem is one of the most complicated and important confronting America. Whatever the ultimate answer may be, such an attitude brings to light the function of birth control as a necessary agency in its solution. The present submerged condition of the Negro is due in large part to the high fertility of the race under disastrously adverse circumstances. Thus, the question arises, to what extent birth control has had a eugenic effect upon the Negro race.
If any question should remain about Sanger's racist agenda, a 1939 letter she wrote to Dr. Clarence Gamble should remove all doubt.
We should hire 3 or 4 colored ministers, preferably with social service backgrounds and with engaging personalities. The most successful educational approach to the Negro is through a religious appeal. We don't want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And the minister is a man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members.
Can there be any wonder why Planned Parenthood opens its facilities in poor inner-city neighborhoods populated by minorities? Can there be any doubt that Sanger's philosophy of creating a pure race is what fuels Planned Parenthood's support of embryonic stem cell research? Margaret Sanger was a racist. She's responsible for the millions of babies that have been ethnically cleansed from our country and should not be celebrated by the taxpayer-funded Smithsonian. Please visit the website and contact the Smithsonian demanding that materials on Sanger be removed from the exhibit.
Can we selectively breed superhumans? You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. Here are the facts. Dogs really are one of humanity's best friends. They've been bred to be this way. Centuries of pruning the genetic characteristics of wolves created dog breeds, and further selective breeding amplified traits in those breeds. So much so that researchers in a project led by Durham University have found that modern dog breeds are genetically disconnected from their ancient ancestors. This sort of breeding isn't limited to dogs. Humans have bred other animals for specific traits, and numerous species of plants have also been modified to increase their yield, their resistance to disease, or just to make them more visually appealing. While this artificial pressure on natural selection has led to innovations in food, medicine, and more, it also raises one terrifying question. What if the human race decided to selectively breed itself? Here's where it gets crazy. We have, or at least groups of humans have made the attempt. This practice, known as eugenics, has a bad name nowadays, but that wasn't always the case. Sir Francis Galton, cousin of Charles Darwin, coined the term in the 1880s, taking inspiration from the Greek phrase, born well. Originally, Galton proposed using financial incentives to encourage marriages that he believed would breed smarter, healthier children. While the term may have come in the 19th century, the idea has been around since Plato, and ancient civilizations also practiced various forms of eugenics. Today, it's associated with atrocities, genocide, forced sterilization, and infanticide. But in the late 19th and early 20th century, eugenics enjoyed tremendous popular support. It was hailed as a solution for a higher quality population. Multiple U.S. states passed legislation in favor of forced sterilization, removing criminals, people with mental disorders, specific ethnic groups, and more from the reproductive pool. This nationwide movement had opponents, but they were powerless to stem the tide of support for eugenics. A poll from 1937 indicated that around 2/3 of the U.S. supported sterilization of mental defectives. Before World War II, proponents of the established U.S. eugenics movement began speaking with scientists in Europe, including Germany, about the purported benefits of this practice. The Rockefeller Institution assisted in the creation of German eugenics programs. Today, the idea of selectively breeding a human being seems appalling. It stinks of racism, murder, and cruelty. But could wide-scale eugenics programs continue in the modern age? If so, it's something they don't want you to know.
All men are created equal. Well, it's not true. Because some are smart. Some aren't.
The family subscribes to a racehorse theory of human development.
When you connect two racehorses, you usually end up with a fast horse.
Secretariat doesn't produce slow horses. They believe that there are superior people, and that if you put together the genes of a superior woman and a superior man, you get a superior offspring.
You have to have the right genes. I have a certain gene. I'm a gene believer.
Do we believe in the gene thing? I mean, I do.
I have great genes and all that stuff, which I'm a believer in.
Well, I think I was born with a drive for success.
I was born with a certain intellect. The fact is, you have to be born and blessed with something up here. God helped me by giving me a certain brain.
It's this. It's not my salesmanship.
It's what?
This. You know what that is? It's the brain power.
I have Ivy League education, smart guy. I have like a very, very high aptitude. I'm pretty good at English. I always did very nicely in English. I mean, like, I'm a smart person. You're born a fighter, and I've seen a lot of people, they want to fight, but they can't.
Some people cannot genetically handle pressure.
I always said winning is somewhat maybe innate.
Maybe it's just something you have. You know, you have the winning gene. Frankly, it'd be wonderful if you could develop it, but I'm not so sure you can. You know, I'm proud to have that German blood. There's no question about it. Great stuff.
We will be protected by God.
You did tell me.
Because they say it does work. It does work.
Mr. President,
now, personally,
Mr. President, you told me during one of the debates that you would bring back waterboarding and a hell of a lot worse. I would do what I would do. I want to keep our country safe. I want to keep our country safe. What does that mean?
When they're shooting, when they're chopping off the heads of our people and other people, when they're chopping off the heads of people because they happen to be a Christian.
So I said to him, they're decapitating people, they're drowning people, and they're chopping off heads.
It's been that way for a long time. In Syria, you have the Christians where their heads are being chopped off randomly and at will, and you have the Muslims who are not in Syria. You have to knock out ISIS. They're chopping off heads. These are animals. You have to knock them out. You have to knock them off strong. They're chopping off people's heads in the Middle East, especially if you happen to be Christian. They're chopping off heads, and she's the other side. They chop off our young people's heads.
I said, we are living in a world where in the Middle East they're cutting people's heads off. They're chopping a Christian's head off, and many of them. We talk about, I don't want ISIS. ISIS is bad, they're evil. When they start doing with the head chopping and drowning thing where they could chop off heads.
We will chop off the heads of the Americans, chop off the heads of the French, chop off the heads of whoever you may bring.
So we can't do waterboarding. But they can do chopping off heads, drowning people in steel cages. They can do whatever they want to do.
A conspiracy to start a war so that the Antichrist can ascend to his position as world ruler. Pike's letter ironically also detailed the specifics of the first two wars with stunning accuracy, suggesting that he knew before time the details surrounding each of the wars. World War I, according to Pike, would be fought to overthrow the czars in Russia and change Russia into a communist state. The Second World War would be fought for two reasons: to establish the State of Israel and to expand communist control over Europe. The Third World War will be what allows the Novus Ordo Seclorum to rise out of the dust. According to Pike, Islam will be the central factor in the downfall of the West. Islam will be decimated in the process, allowing for the new religion of pure Luciferianism to spread on the earth.
The president was one of those Americans who went to church, but he spent a lot of the time this weekend meeting with advisors at the presidential retreat Camp David. When he returned to the White House, he spoke to the media.
This crusade, this war on terrorism, is going to take a while.
The Holy Father has ordered us here. He has promoted you in absentia to the rank of Archbishop, as befits your task. Congratulations, Your Grace. We, the faithful here assembled, form the Knights of the Ninth Crusade. We are yours to command, Archbishop Maxwell. Employ us as you will.
In 1717, the Templars made their reappearance in Europe. They had grown in both number and strength, and were now ready to coin a new identity, free from their reputation of the past, and given credibility by none other than the monarchy and aristocracy of England. And the name they chose for themselves was a name that will be known by many, but understood by a few. This new name, the Freemasons. 20 years after Jerusalem was taken, the Dome of the Rock was seized by a group of warrior monks calling themselves the Knights of the Temple of Solomon, or more simply, the Knights Templars. In Jerusalem, the Templars began to deviate further and further away from the practices of Christianity. They learnt the secret arts of the Kabbalah, an ancient form of Jewish magic, along with its dark rites and rituals. The Jews had learnt the arts from the pagans of ancient Egypt during the times of enslavement to the Pharaoh, and developed them into Babylon at the time of Nebuchadnezzar. In 1307, King Philippe of France arrested them for charges of denial of Christ, homosexuality, and idol worship, as well as magic. In 1314, Pope Clement V declared all Templars as heretics to Christianity, ordering all their properties to be seized. Their leader, Jacques de Molay, was captured and burnt to the stake. The Templars were cornered, and just when it seemed they were finished forever, a glimmer of hope arose from a seemingly certain end. They were to find a safe haven as well as an ally. But not in France. In fact, in a country in a desperate struggle for independence against the English, the country of Scotland.
Pike was Grand Master of a Luciferian group known as the Order of Palladium Sovereign Council of Wisdom, which had been founded in Paris in 1737. He enticed an American occultist and Freemason named Elbert Pike into joining the upper echelon of the Illuminati. When invited by Mazzini, he readily agreed to join. Pike was then made head of the Illuminati operations in the United States. Mazzini could sense an extra powerful occult nature about Pike and tasked him to write an occultic book that guided the transition from average high-ranking Mason into top-ranking Illuminati Mason, that of the 33rd degree. Pike then penned what is considered the modern-day Freemasonic Bible called Morals and Dogma. This book was used by the Illuminati as a Pied Piper to bring Freemasonic lodges in the United States under their control, where before the Illuminati had operated mainly out of the Columbia Lodge. Elbert Pike is known for a few other things as well. He is a Confederate general and a founding member of the KKK, but I also think it's pretty odd that Elbert Pike is the only Confederate general with an honorary statue on federal property in Washington, D.C. But he was not honored for being a commander or even as a lawyer, but for being the southern regional leader of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. The statue stands on a pedestal near the foot of the Capitol Hill between the Department of Labor building and the Municipal building between 3rd and 4th Streets on D Street Northwest. Palladism had been brought into the Great Plan from Egypt by Pythagoras in the 5th century BC, and it was the cult of Satan that was introduced in the inner circles of the Masonic lodges in the early 1800s. You can follow the existence of the Illuminati through the 1800s and early 1900s through the Library of Congress. Just go to the Library of Congress website and search Illuminati, and it'll bring up hundreds of old newspapers where you can follow the timeline of their recruitment centers through Masonic lodges and other organizations. In 1967, Jewish broadcaster Myron C. Fagan described with documentary evidence how the Illuminati became the instrument of the House of Rothschild to achieve a one-world government, and how every war during the past 2 centuries was fomented by this Illuminati. He describes how one Jacob H. Schiff was sent to the United States by the Rothschilds to further the Illuminati plot, and how Schiff plotted to get control of both the Democrat and Republican parties. How Schiff seduced our Congress and our presidents to achieve control of our entire money system and create the income tax cancer, and how Schiff and his co-conspirators created the Council of Foreign Relations to control our elected officials to gradually drive the U.S. into becoming an enslaved unit of the United Nations one world government.
So city landmarks and icons represent intention. So here we see Elbert Pike in Washington, D.C., and this is a very large statue in a beautiful area looking down on maybe Persephone or someone that's been conquered, and their flag and being draped over. Now the statue was erected by the Supreme Council of AASR Freemasonry. It's the only statue of a Confederate general in a city filled with statues of Civil War generals. Looking further, the handsomest man in the Southwest. During the Civil War, Pike trained and led 3 regiments of Native American, notice they don't say Indians, Confederate cavalry at the Battle of Pea Ridge. He was a Klansman. It's widely believed that Elbert Pike organized and led the Arkansas Ku Klux Klan, documented in the book 1924 book Authentic History of Ku Klux Klan. General Elbert Pike, he was a Satanist, Pike's obscure books on Masonic ritual have not escaped controversy either. Here's your 33 degrees, the double head you see in Hitler, the double head you see everywhere of the eagles. We'd have to look up what that means. So Mr. Pike in his Freemason regalia has been portrayed as advocating the worship of Lucifer and hence Satan. This man has a mausoleum in Washington, D.C. He says, maintain the purity of the Luciferian doctrine, 33-degree Freemason. The fruits of his labor live after him. In the home, he was buried in Supreme Council at 433 3rd Street. Get it? 433 3rd Street. All right, this is where it gets good. So Pike's remains were moved in December of 1944. What happened in 1944, folks? June 6th was D-Day, World War II, the Battle of Normandy, with the landing of 155,000 Allied troops on the beaches of Normandy, France. And this is when they moved Mr. Pike, fulfilling the prophecy. The vault is in the wall behind this memorial bust. They put a total monument in Washington, D.C. to this guy, the Jesuits. All right? That's why this guy is important. Now, he is saying that they need to eradicate all Muslims. That's what this video doc is about. But after that, they're coming after all heretics and Christians. It's a war on all to end all. This is their prophecy. They're fulfilling it. We got to wake up fast or protect our loved ones as best we can. It's the Christians too, folks. They're playing you. They're playing all of us. That's why I want us all to work together and love one another.
12 ayes, 11 nays.
The ayes have it. The nomination will be favorably reported.
Breaking right now at noon, a Senate committee just voting to recommend Betsy DeVos as Secretary of Education. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Susan Shaw.
I'm Emily Leonard. This vote just happened within the past 15 minutes in Washington.
We are joined right now by our political reporter, Rick Albin, for a look at what happened today and what happens next.
This has been a very tumultuous 11 days of the Trump administration.
Fairly well known in Republican circles. She's a big party donor. She served as the former finance chair of the RNC. She was chair of the Michigan Republican Party. Also one of the country's leading advocates for school vouchers. She's also the sister of Eric Prince. Remember Eric Prince? That name sounds familiar. It's because he is the guy who founded Blackwater,
a full-fledged criminal enterprise executed by the military contractors known formerly as Blackwater, according to the sworn testimony of two of its employees. The nation's Jeremy Scahill, who broke the story, joins us in a moment. The details come straight from two sworn affidavits filed late last night by persons whose identities have been sealed to protect their identity, men who have previously cooperated with federal prosecutors in the criminal inquiry into Blackwater. John Doe number 2 also stating that Mr. Prince, pictured here, smuggled unlawful weapons into Iraq, including sawed-off semi-automatic machine guns with silencers and illegal hand grenades. And the affidavit also says that Prince, quote, views himself as a Christian crusader eliminating Muslims and the Islamic faith from the globe. Prince, quote, views himself as a Christian crusader eliminating Muslims and the Islamic faith from the globe.
Against radical Islamic terrorism, which we will eradicate completely from the face of the earth.
To that end, Mr. Prince intentionally deployed to Iraq certain men who shared his vision of Christian supremacy. Many of these men used Mr. Prince operated his companies in a manner that encouraged and rewarded the destruction of Iraqi life. Going to Iraq to shoot and kill Iraqis was viewed as a sport or game. Call signs based on the Knights of the Templar, the warriors who fought the Crusades.
You provide the leadership, communications, intelligence, medical, and logistics support to that unit, and they can stop the refugees.
Mr. Prince, given the legacy of the work that Blackwater did in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and the issues that were fleshed out by some of those involved with the company, do you have any regrets about the work there?
I have great regrets for ever going to work for the State Department. We did exactly the mission they asked us to do. We did more than 100,000 missions. No one under our care was ever killed or injured. And the men used their firearms in less than 0.5% of all those missions, while doing the most dangerous personal security detail missions in the world.
So as Pope Francis pontificates, like all the other popes before him, about helping the poor and taking care of the poor, when the Vatican is the richest country in the world, you can see how it trickles down here. The quote from Francis is what everybody sees. Hey, I'm a champion of the poor. Oh, but he had to fire a German bishop who spent $43 million to remodel his pad. But it's right in line with what's going on in the United States. Timothy Dolan, the controller of presidents of the United States there for years now, the Archbishop of New York, has found that 10 of 34 active archbishops have buildings worth more than $1 million. Cardinal Timothy Dolan packs a 15,000 square foot mansion in Manhattan, in the priciest neighborhood in the city, worth at least $30 million. But then we go to Cardinal Francis George, got a pretty fancy crib himself. He's got 19 chimneys. It gets cold there when you're pontificating and you're trying to help the poor. It sits on 1.7 prime acres in the ritzy Gold Coast neighborhood and is worth $14.3 million as is. So these guys talk one thing, preach one thing, yet practice something else, and that's lifestyles of the rich and priestly.
New York's Catholic Archbishop is among 22 men elevated to cardinal by Pope Benedict Saturday. Timothy Dolan smiled broadly as he approached the Pope. It came a day after he received a heartfelt papal thumbs up for his animated speech to cardinals about spreading the faith.
He said, well, thank you again for yesterday. I said, thank you for this. Let us pray. God of our ancestors and Lord of mercy, you have made all things, and in your providence have charged us to rule the creatures produced by you. You have made all things, and in your providence have charged us to rule the creatures produced by you, and short-lived, lacking in comprehension of judgment and of laws. Indeed, though one might be perfect among mortals, if wisdom which comes from you be lacking, we count for nothing.
Tell us what you think about this today. Good to meet you.
Nice to be here and nice to see you. And my name is Philip Thomas. I'm a naturalized American citizen. I lived in many parts of the world. I lived in Muslim countries, and I know how human rights are being violated, and people of other religions are treated like dirt. And this country, it's a great country. For the past 8 years, we had a nightmare with Obama, and that nightmare is over today. Yeah. As the other brother, the African American brother, said, a lot of quotation he gave from the Bible. You read Daniel chapter 2, you'll find God is the installer and God is the remover of kings. Today, God had installed Mr. Trump as the president of this country.
That's right, we voted.
Warning, bullshit alert. That was bullshit. Bullshit detected. Take precaution.
With this symbolic military salute, the former Superior General of the Jesuits, Adolfo Nicolas, handed the baton to the next leader of the Society of Jesus, the Venezuelan Arturo Sosa.
It has long been a tradition for a newly elected Superior General to meet with the Pope. It's an opportunity for His Holiness to speak with the Superior of the Society of Jesus to offer wisdom and counsel, and for the Jesuit General to ensure that his leadership is in line with that of the Pontiff. This morning, Pope Francis graced General Congregation 36 with his presence. From a non-discrepant vehicle and with no entourage, Pope Francis emerged at the Jesuit Curia to speak first with Father General, then to the delegates and staff of GC36. This wasn't a social call. This was the congregation, with newly elected Father General Arturo Sosa, presenting themselves before the Bishop of Rome and asking him to guide their discernment towards his vision of the Church. We are the Society of Jesus. We are your servants. We are ready to set the world on fire. Send us. We are the Society of Jesus. We are your servants.
We are ready to set the world on fire. Send us.
In his inaugural address, George W. Bush proclaimed that an angel would ride the whirlwind and direct the storm. The master plan was unveiled in 2001 for World War III. They started Elbert Pike's blueprint when they flew 2 planes into the World Trade Centers and blamed it on Islam. The storm that would come and the angel that would bring it were long-awaited prophetic fulfillments. And as Elbert Pike, Grand Wizard of the Craft, had predicted, Islam would be the choice religion to use to foment a crisis between it and the West that would only get worse. What is the common factor every time we see a crisis? Who's behind it? Islam. And they want you to believe it's organically an issue of Islam. This was planned hundreds of years ago. The master plan to use Islam was kicked off in 2001 when the fear of Americans was taken advantage of by an esoteric cabal lurking in the shadows. And they have quite a plan for Islam. The esoteric cabal is using Islam to achieve the great work. It's all been mapped out. We've seen what they're doing with the migrant crisis. We've seen what they've done in England with the Sharia courts, and on and on and on. They're using Islam to stir the pot. The system has to come down. It has to topple. Islam will be used for the ultimate goal, and that is to fully usher in the Luciferian capstone. They're going to keep using it to destroy Western Christianity, Western culture.
You know what they put in the water, don't you? Fluoride. On the pretext that it strengthens your teeth.
recall for me the first time you encountered the signal?
This is the signal.
We're not certain what we're dealing with here.
If you hear it, you have been chosen. The signal.
And I know that you can feel it too, feel it too, feel it too.
Showmanship and theatrics. When a magician waves his hand and says, this is where the magic is happening, the real trick is happening somewhere else. Misdirection, a basic concept of magic.
I need to get to here. What's there? The earliest estimate of the singularity, when man will be able to transfer his consciousness into machines and achieve immortality.
So you're upset about missing out on becoming some sort of freakish, self-aware robot?
By this much?
The Illuminati can be generally difficult to define, so I will stick to the basic facts to keep it as simple as I can for the sake of this presentation. The Illuminati are a secret society founded in 1776 in Bavaria, Germany by a chap called Adam Weishaupt. The word itself, Illuminati, literally means to be illuminated with knowledge, as this knowledge in turn brings light, illuminating an individual. They are deeply occultic in their beliefs and they revel in secret knowledge. Another name for Satan is Lucifer. Lucifer, which literally translates to light bearer, is more likely to be portrayed as a beautiful angel and light-giving. It is common amongst the secret societies and occultic beliefs for Lucifer to be considered as the source of everything, but especially of all light and of all knowledge. The Illuminati are 100% Luciferian in their philosophy. They sincerely believe that the serpent or the devil is the good guy in the Genesis account, and that Eve was right to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and that when she did become like God. Elbert Pike, one of the founding fathers of Freemasonry, was himself a 33-degree Freemason. He was also a top leader in the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. Pike, being Sovereign Grand Commander of the Scottish Rite, was a devout Luciferian. His famous works, Morals and Dogma, in 1871, is still today considered to be the handbook or study guide for the Scottish Rite within Freemasonry. This is a direct quote from Elbert Pike's works, Morals and Dogma. Open quote. Lucifer, the light-bearer, strange and mysterious name to give to the spirit of darkness. Lucifer, the son of the morning, is it he who bears the light? Doubt it not. End quote. However, the Bible contradicts this teaching. It exposes Lucifer as being Satan. Open quote. And no wonder, for even Satan himself disguises himself as an angel of light. Close quote. The esoteric symbol to present Lucifer is traditionally the lightning bolt. This is referencing Jesus' words in Luke chapter 10 verse 18, where he says, quote, "And I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." End quote. It is not confirmed how many people belong to the Illuminati. According to a credible ex-Illuminati member known as Savali, they make up approximately 1% of the population. They consist of 13 bloodlines. That is to say, you are either born into the order or you're not. So if you hear Lady Gaga is the Illuminati, it is unlikely that she is in the bloodline and actually a part of the Illuminati order. It is more likely the case she has been recruited by them to promote their agenda and help them indoctrinate the next generation. Lady Gaga is just one of the many music artists who have openly sold their soul to the industry in exchange for fame and fortune, hence why her debut album is titled The Fame Monster. The 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati make up the world's elite. They are the head of the banking systems. They are the think tanks of the world, the political groups, the educational groups. They own all mainstream media channels, and their main agenda is simple: world domination, commonly called the New World Order. They want one global village of which they control. They see us, the general public, the masses, as nothing more than a bewildered herd or cattle. Their nickname for us, the people, is the sheeple. The Rockefellers are one of the more commonly known Illuminati families, and David Rockefeller, currently the patriarch of the Rockefeller family, is an American banker and philanthropist. Not just any American banker, mind you. He, along with the Rothschilds, another Illuminati bloodline, between these two families own the entire financial banking system and thus solely control the Federal Reserve, the Rockefellers controlling America and the Rothschilds covering the finances and banks in Europe. David Rockefeller is also the founder of the Council of Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission. Both of these political groups basically get together to discuss foreign policy and ultimately are responsible for deciding the future of the world, which again and again the same theme emerges, a new world order, and he makes no secret of this. David Rockefeller is quoted in his book Memoirs as saying, quote, "Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists, and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure, One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I'm proud of it. I need to move on, but if you are interested in more information about the New World Order and the Illuminati's agenda, how they plan to achieve world domination, check out the Georgia Guidestones. This is a monument erected in Elbert County, Georgia, which has their agenda engraved in their own words on each side of the 4 stone slabs in a different language. There are 10 guides, or commandments if you will, openly outlining their intentions, how they intend to reduce the world population over 80% from 7 billion down to just 500 million, and bring about a new one world religion, or universal spirituality. This monument is generally shrouded with mystery, but the engraved tribute found next to it is a big clue. It has inscribed, "Let these be guidestones to an age of reason." The Age of Reason is a book written by Thomas Paine in 1794. Its intent was to destroy the Judeo-Christian beliefs upon which the American Republic was founded. I should issue a warning at this point that this is all pretty disturbing and very serious, and it's very much out there if you want to look further into it. It's all there, hiding in plain sight. Okay, so let's move on and look at the esoteric symbols the Illuminati use to represent themselves and how they are very much present in today's culture. One of the main symbols is the all-seeing eye of Lucifer, which is referencing that we are under constant surveillance. The all-seeing eye of Lucifer is sometimes known as the Eye of Providence, which is commonly found on the $1 bill.
The Lord Jesus wants you to come to him, just as you are. He wants you to come to him no matter what you have done in your life, no matter what mistakes you have made. He is kind, understanding, and always forgiving. He cares very much about each one of us. Maybe you are unsure if you really have given your heart fully to the Lord Jesus. Maybe you would like to say yes to him for the very first time. Or maybe you would like to recommit your life to the Lord Jesus and start afresh today. The Bible says, "Salvation is found in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given to men by which we must be saved." The Bible also says, if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. If you'd like to hand your life to the Lord Jesus and put your hope and trust in him, then please repeat this prayer. Dear Lord Jesus, please hear my prayer. I know you gave your life for me, and I know that you're alive today. Please forgive my sins. Come into my heart and make your home with me. Thank you for being my Lord and Saviour. Amen.
CRISPR. The technique is revolutionary, and like all revolutions, it's perilous. CRISPR goes well beyond anything that the Aslamar Conference discussed. It could at least allow genetic researchers to conjure up everything anyone has ever worried they would: designer babies, invasive mutants, species-specific bioweapons, and a dozen other apocalyptic sci-fi tropes. It brings with it all new rules for the practice of research in the life sciences. But no one knows what the rules are or who will be the first to break them. So that gets you thinking. And then here's this article just coming out yesterday, or a couple days ago. A future of genetically engineered children is closer than you think. It's in the liberal magazine Mother Jones. They speak in their little terms of the first step is a no-brainer. So they start talking about all the diseases that are going to be fixed, how great it's going to be, and what they're doing now. But What I want to introduce you to is the invention of CRISPR technology. I'll look up again the name CRISPR, but it's a technology that allows scientists to program a protein to change specific sequences of your DNA within a cell that gives us the ability to edit the human genome. We could change the bad code into the HTT gene of an embryo back to normal version. Now, this goes hand in hand with what I just published about the new living cancer cell coming out by Novartis, where they're taking out your T cells and you're putting in programmable genes and an on and off switch and putting it back into your immune system T cells. If that isn't creepy enough, this goes hand in hand with the CRISPR technology. It's transhumanism. Here we go. Okay. So as much as 100% or 10% of the population carries genes that put them at risk for disorders such as sickle cell anemia. And I'll put the video in the links of the living cancer cell, but what they're saying, it's a preventative cancer gene. So everybody's going to have to get one because it's preventative, right? All the insurance companies, this is how they do it. So they're saying there's going to be risk, or they're saying you have to do it. And its development is to free humanity from painful diseases and worried about the creepy places worried about the creepy places it could take us. But CRISPR wasn't ready for prime time. It fixed some of the cells in the embryos, but not all of them. Oops. And also caused some, quote, off-target, new term, mutations in other genes. But then in July, researchers at Oregon Health and Science University, kids working on it, fixed genetic diseases in dozens of viable embryos without any unintended effects. Suddenly, human gene editing was real. Really. It's been going on a lot longer than that, folks. This is just them informing us that we're way developed and you can't stop us. To go on. The technology can go awry by some making mutations in other genes, and there are moral issues. Quote, sometimes I feel we're not on a slippery slope, we're flying off a cliff, said Marcy Donofsky, executive director of the Center for Genetics and Society. The Center for Genetics and Society says we're flying off a cliff. Q Gattaca, the 1997 film about a dystopian society in which people are genetically engineered and natural children are considered inferior, she fears that once we alter genes that can cause disease, we'll alter other genes too. And who's to say what is a disease and what isn't? Good point. Once we start going down the line, which we already have, we're accepting a story that tells us that some people are genetically superior to others. We're in a world of genetic haves and have-nots. Parents who have the money will feel like they need to keep up. Fertility clinics will jump right on board. When I asked a prominent Stanford bioengineer Drew Endy if he believed we'd soon be designing our heirs, he said, we already are. It's happening and everybody's happy about it. But here's Senator Backus, who wrote Obamacare. He praises the head of healthcare, largest healthcare company in the country, for literally writing Obamacare. But here's what I want to get into. Microchip included in affordable hair. Now remember, they're coming out with euthanasia now and whatnot in California, and they're starting with, I'm choosing to die. See how this works? Here's the actual language used in the Affordable Care Act on chipping on all plans. So I'll let you get into this. I'll include this in the show notes. You can see how tiny these microchips are. There's literally just tens of thousands of them. Nanobots replacing neurons, as I spoke about. The nanorobot will replace human nerve cells with artificial nerve cells. This means these artificial devices with RFID can take over your brain with remote biocommunication, aka Wi-Fi. The basic idea consists of a set of nanowires tethered to electronics in the main catheter, such as they will spread out in a bouquet arrangement in a particular portion of the brain's vascular system, gets into the blood-brain barrier. Such arrangement could support a very large number of probes in the millions. Each N-wire is used to record very securely electrical activity of a single or small group of neurons without invading the brain parenchyma. All right, so here's a little video of what the nanobots do, how they work. This is inside our blood-brain. This can be smart out of smart dust. This can be put in our food systems, our liquid systems. No one would know it. No one would even care that this is going on. But this, they are telling us, is going on. This is happening in real time. Now watch these tether to the neuron. This is neurons in our brains. This is communication. These are called neuron synapse replacers. They get in between the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere of our brains. And they interrupt the communication. They alter our feelings. They get an immune systems. They have read-write technology. This is what I covered in 3 hours on my touchless torture video, which I'll include in the show notes. And this is designed for all of us. I don't care what your religion is. So let's get more into the hand sensation that's going on. But just one more just to drive home the point. The chip is loaded with more than 5 billion transistors and boasts more than 250 million synapses or programmable logic points. This is how deep the technology goes.
Well, I thought I'd go into what could be a grand conspiracy or something else, or maybe it's just all make-believe, I don't know. But it seems like something is really happening in regards to mass migration, the drop in Western sperm counts and testosterone in men, reproductive abilities for a lot of Western allied countries, and also the fact that certain very powerful nations seem to be funding this at the same time that they are actively losing control on a world sphere. So what do I mean now? Well, early this year, about 5 months ago, I did a video called 5 Reasons We're Being Chemically Subverted. This put forward the idea that regarding the fact that sperm rates have been dropping in men, in the West, and the fact that, there was all these chemicals in the water, there's all these pesticides that are being used that, affect testosterone levels. Testosterone levels are not only dropping in men, but the World Health Organization, all these places have actually lowered the normal rate of testosterone. So it seems like it's normal even though it's not normal. And even now with the lowered rates of testosterone accepted as normal within males, it's actually declined even lower than that rate. So it's actually lowering all around. Testosterone, of course, is linked to all kinds of things, especially reproductive capabilities of the male population, interest in just sex in general, and things of that nature, and all kinds of other things on male health. It's also linked to female health. You can see here that females and women's is this. There was a study that was put out a little while ago. I think it was 2008 or 9. I think. I've got it right here, but it shows that women and happiness is still declining at the same time. This is all in the West. It's called the paradox of declining female happiness. So all these things in the water supply and all these kinds of things which have been documented at length. There's a great video by Truth Factory, as a matter of fact, which outlined recently this kinds of things as well in regards to a certain chemical, which was this one here. It was just found, it's the most popular type of pesticide found in Western water supplies, and it actually has another pesticide linked to the actual estrogen levels and also testosterone levels, all kinds of weird things like this, linked into the water supply of Western populations. Of course, I commented a little while ago about the fact that the contraceptive pill, etc., was also turning 20% of male riverfish transgender. So there's a lot of these things in the chemicals. Main point is that affecting Western populations almost exclusively because of the, who knows why. I mean, to see the pattern in it is like seeing the pattern in a grand chaos environment. But there is, you can always ask this, the question in these things is, who stands to gain by things like these kinds of things? Who stands to gain? Well, there's a number of little breadcrumbs I've been following, and I think I've worked out a few suspects, that are tied into all these things. Of course, this could be a grand agenda, who really knows? Now, of course, Syria has been systematically destroyed by the banks and arms cartels, leading to a massive influx of mass migration into Europe and all these countries. Now, here's two things to take away from this. And we're just looking at this very cold. I don't want to get into the emotional empathy and all these kinds of things about taking in immigrants, or if you should or you shouldn't. There's legitimate mathematical arguments just as to do with space. For instance, if you've got a house and you could probably take in 3 people, let's say if you look at the house in reference to a country, 3 people in a house of 2 bedrooms, you might be able to live, okay. But if you take in 15 people, it becomes more difficult. Suddenly everyone's waiting to use the kitchen, the bathroom. There's sleeping problems. Where's everyone going to sleep every time you go to the lounge to relax? Maybe there's 3 people sleeping there. Now, if you take in 50, then you have a massive problem. You take in 100, it's really hard for you to function in the house. You might not even be able to get into the door. So there's mathematical considerations here just to do with cold, hard facts, and the fact that there is a limit to what a country can take as far as immigration before the infrastructure starts collapsing. I mean, you just have to be real about it. So we step back away a bit from that, and you can see that, of course, Europe is going through mass immigration problems. Well, one of the things here in regards to immigration is there's 2 aspects. One of them is the proponents, saying, yes, we need to open all the doors. We need to let in mass migration. Of course, there's another element that is saying, don't do that. Okay, so here's something from the UN. So the UN's solution to this chemical subversion on our populace, which they don't name, they just say it's a reproductive decline, but there's mountains of evidence here, that show all kinds of, chemicals are affecting us, etc., and things like that. So, I'll put a link to Truth Factory's video that goes into this one chemical that they state is affecting male testosterone and reproductive capabilities within humans. But there's many of these videos you can look at. A lot of information seems to be multi-layered across every spectrum you can imagine, even social engineering to psychological engineering to in fact chemical subversion and all these techniques. Whatever the case is, the main thing to take away from it is that these countries here, United States, Japan, pretty much all of these are allies. You could even class Russian Federation in the greater scheme of things as an ally. It's largely a Christian nation. So a lot of these are Christian nations, as a matter of fact. So the point is that if you're just taking Christian as, and it's important to realize, even if you're an atheist, okay, a lot of the Western civilization comes out of these projections of moral frameworks, religious systems, whatever, in order to project a framework, a moral framework that you can put into society that works in a way of creating equilibrium within that society. So these are evolved mechanisms, just like Hinduism is, in India, things of that nature, or whatever you want to, whatever system that's evolved over hundreds of years, hundreds of years, thousands of years, that's came in as a way of equilibrium in an environment to do with moral structures. So when I refer to Christianity, that should be seen as the same thing. These are Christian environments that lean on Christian value systems of the past in order to have the things that they do. Even their moral frameworks were evolved from those systems, as a matter of fact. So you have a Christian framework in a lot of these countries, and you have at the same time in a lot of these countries declining reproductive capabilities, okay, and a lot of them, right, they've got negative population growth. So, the wellness factor, population, desire for families, the amount of chemicals that are affecting them and things like that, they affect these countries. And, I'm not just saying it's that. It could be, there's a number of things, there's propaganda methodologies, and things like that. But what I mean is replacement migration. This is from the UN itself. This is their plan for solving this problem. They state, to solve this problem, United Nations predictions indicate that over the next 50 years, the populations of virtually all countries of Europe as well as Japan will face population decline and population aging. The new challenges of declining and aging populations will require comprehensive reassessment of many established policies and programs, including those related to immigration, international immigration. Focusing on these 2 striking and critical population trends, the report considers replacement immigration. Replacement immigration for 8 low fertility countries: France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Republic of Korea, Russian Federation, United Kingdom and United States, and 2 regions, Europe and the European Union. Replacement migration refers to international migration that a country would need to offset population decline and population aging, resulting from low fertility and mortality rates. So that's their stratagem. straight from the UN itself, is really to don't worry about the sovereignty of a country. You know, it has to always be more and more and more. And we're going to just take people from other countries en masse and put them in your country.
Please keep your comments within 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Joe Mariano. I also run a website called thefullertoninformer.com. You know, I noticed that this is a pretty big building. When I pulled up in here, it obviously encompasses a lot of administrative offices and a lot of students. I guess this is a K through 12 system. And it's a pretty broad spectrum of demographic as well as ethnicity. And I think everyone here in this room, including up on the board, realizes that tyranny is a fact of life, whether it be your parents or even your own selves. I don't know how you got here or when you got here, but I'm sure you can all relate. The school districts have become the enforcement arm of a variety of what I believe are agendas. Vaccination is an agenda, as evidenced by how this law was enacted. Our legislators are bought and paid for. The lobbyists were up on the dais during the hearings, whispering in the ears of the legislators. It's unbelievable. The Disneyland measles outbreak involved no school-age children. And from my understanding, the strain of measles that was involved in that outbreak, the MMR vaccine has not been tested for efficacy against it. Now, with anything that's going to be forced on students as a condition of school entry, you would think that they would be tested for mutagenic potential, carcinogenic potential, or even impairment of fertility. I'm here to tell you a fact, ladies and gentlemen. On every vaccine insert in Section 13, it says no such thing has been done for the vaccinations. They have not been tested for impairment of fertility. I don't know if anybody in this room is from China. China has a one-child policy in the past, forced abortions, forced sterilizations. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a very good possibility that we've laid the groundwork in this country for that. I hear all the talk about technology, and I couldn't help but be horrified as I sat in the trunk of my car. I have these reports from the military. This is a 40-year-old report from the Naval Medical Research Institute, and there are 2,000 citations on the dangers of microwave radiation, and we're bringing iPads into the classrooms. And you've probably never heard about this. Maybe the superintendent has, because I've been very vocal in other districts. But microwave radiation and wireless radiation has no place in the classroom. It is a dangerous thing. There's so much research out there. It's insane that this can be ignored for as long as it has. It's just going hand in hand with the insanity of forced vaccination. When we were forcing children to be exposed to a Class 2B carcinogen on the same level as lead, which is microwave radiation, as well as take vaccinations,
You have 30
upwards
seconds.
of 60 vaccinations, 65 vaccinations, that have not been tested for carcinogenic potential, mutagenic potential, or impairment of fertility. So I would urge all of you to agendize pushing back the PBE filing deadline to line up with the July 2016 implementation of SB 277. Thank you.
I admire Margaret Sanger enormously. Her courage, her tenacity, her vision. I am really in awe of her. I admire Margaret Sanger enormously. Her courage, her tenacity, her vision. I am really in awe of her.
Hello, Mr. Hindle. Or as they called you around the hospital, Zap. I want you to make a choice. There's a slow-acting poison coursing through your system, which only I have the antidote for. Will you murder a mother and her child, to save yourself. Dr. Gordon's time is up.
Mrs. Gordon!
Listen carefully if you will.
Forget mobile phones. Your children and grandchildren may well want an implant instead.
You know, when we check out at the grocery store, we'll be swiping our own arm over the scanner. And that will be something we feel we can't live without.
It would be such a disadvantage to not have the implant that it essentially becomes not optional.
Let's imagine a little bit what the future might look like if I could take your stem cells and put them on a chip, or your stem cells and put them on a chip. It would be a personalized chip just for you.
And he provides that no one will be able to buy or to sell except the one that has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666.
Well, Big Brother will now be taught at a school near you. Across the country, schools are finding ways to track and monitor students inside and outside the classroom. The techniques range from chips embedded in school ID cards to GPS systems installed in computers, tracking students' every move, to actual surveillance cameras. And it's happening in Texas.
Somea's material can be stretched, folded, or crumpled up like paper, but the electronics on it still work. That's why it might be useful for biomedical applications.
And power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed.
This is a developmental system made by MC10, and it has an antenna and some sensors embedded in it. And what we plan to do is work with them to advance a tattoo that could be used for authentication.
So, so apparently this actually is artificial life, and it's able to grow.
They call that the nanotechnology.
Nanotechnology, imagine that.
Smart dust. This side you can see. What's happening here is what is inside, like this. This is from inside coming out.
Okay.
And it's nothing to do with the roots. Is more the matter is changing.
Okay.
And webbing, that's what the mission. See? The little one, that's why it's fractal. You have a big one and you have a small one. And when you look at the small one deeper, you can see there is a small one on top of the small one.
Up to how many times in terms of in micro sizes can you go in?
Oh, that one I can go to 1,000 times.
Oh boy, okay.
You see?
Oh, jeez.
So
right.
here, what's happened, he break. Okay, because for some reason, when you pick it up, the dust, or you know, so the head of the dust break. So after that, he go all over the place. 1,000 head go and he go on their ways.
Each one becomes one again and continues, and then just takes this.
And here you can see you have a glass on top of the glass. Okay, this is the lamelle, and on top of it there is another glass. So it's not my breath or something like that to make it them move.
Okay, it's
because
actually sandwiched inside.
Yeah,
there.
yes, it's a sandwich.
If it's sandwiched inside there and it's still able to move the way we saw it move.
Yeah.
Then.
But for the wealthy elite, their fears went beyond things like insurrection. They were worried about the financial impact. Remember, it was not just the cotton plantations that profited from slavery. Whether you're talking about the banks or the insurance companies, the railroads, even the newspapers, the fact is that almost every aspect of the American economy was at some level or another invested in the slave business. You also need to recognize that for the wealthy elitist who controlled the system, slaves were an asset as long as they were slaves. But at the moment they are set free, they become a liability. And what the elite knew was that the end of slavery would instantly release 4 million people into the economy who had been kept uneducated and effectively unemployable anywhere but the cotton field. And what they were concerned about was that this was going to bankrupt the American economy. Taxes were going to go through the roof to take care of these people. Crime was going to be rampant. The prisons were going to be flooded. There was going to be this population overrun. And in the north, the biggest fear was migration from the south of these black people. The other fear that these people had was intermarriage between blacks and whites would lead to a loss of racial purity. The question was, what were they going to do about it? And their initial thought was that they would just send all the slaves back to Africa. This plan was called colonization, and it had broad support among the wealthy elite. In fact, the American Colonization Society was even funded by the United States Congress. But in the end, colonization proved to be unworkable, and the idea was eventually scrapped. But about that same time, a new philosophy was emerging in the world. It was called eugenics, and for some, it seemed like the perfect solution to what had become known as the Negro dilemma.
I do not join in the belief that the African is our equal in brain or in heart. And I believe that if we can, in any fair way, possess ourselves of his services, we have an equal right to utilize them to our advantage. Francis Galton, 1857.
Francis Galton is known as the father of eugenics. He actually coined the phrase eugenics. So he believed in trying to increase those he felt were superior in stock and decrease those he felt were inferior. Francis Galton came from a very wealthy family, a family that made its wealth from the slave trade. And what a lot of people don't know is that Francis Galton was a cousin to Charles Darwin. Francis Galton took Charles Darwin's philosophies and ideas and thoughts, and he actually put them into practice, and that's what we know today as eugenics. Eugenics and evolution are related in that they both see what they consider to be the highest form of primate, such as the gorilla, as almost indistinguishable from what they consider the lowest form of human, the African and the Aborigine.
At some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. The break between man and his nearest allies will then be wider, for it will intervene between man and a more civilized state, and some ape as low as a baboon instead of as now between the Negro or Australian and the gorilla. Charles Darwin, 1890.
Charles Darwin is very well known for writing The Origin of Species in the 1800s. This book gave rise to evolutionary theory. What people don't know is that there was actually a longer original title to this book, and that was On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life.
But they would hire crusaders to do the dirty work. And the primary one they settled upon was a woman named Margaret Sanger. She was the founder of the American Birth Control League and the publisher of its newsletter, the Birth Control Review. On a practical level, the relationship between Sanger and these elitists was basically a marriage of convenience. In order to advance their common agendas, they needed a front man and she needed money. And the whole thing would be held together by this kind of bizarre obsession with race and class. The result was that the American Birth Control League became the driving force behind the American eugenics movement. Eugenics would no longer just be a philosophy. Sanger and others like her were going to put it into practice.
We are paying for and even submitting to the dictates of an ever-increasing, unceasingly spawning class of human beings who never should have been born at all. Margaret Sanger, 1922.
The laws of nature require the obliteration of the unfit, and human life is valuable only when it is of use to the community or race. Madison Grant, 1916.
The ultimate goal that these people have in mind is the goal to create a one-world government run by the banking industry, run by the bankers, and they're doing it in sections. The European currency, the euro, and the European Constitution is one part of it. Now they're trying to do it in America with the North American Union, right? And they want to create a new currency called the Amero, right? And the whole agenda is to create a one-world government where everybody has an RFID chip implanted in them, all money is to be in those chips, right? There'll be no more cash. And this is getting me straight from Rockefeller himself. This is what they want to accomplish. And all money will be in your chips. And so instead of having cash, anytime you have money in your chip, they can take out whatever they want to take out whenever they want to. If they say you owe us this much money in taxes, they just deduct it out of your chip digitally.
Total control.
Total control. And if you're like me or you, and you're protesting what they're doing, they can just turn off your chip. And you have nothing. You can't buy food. You can't do anything. It's total control of the people.
And that chip's connected to a database that has your purchasing records, what you do, what you sell.
Everything is in there, you know? And so they want a one world government controlled by them, everybody being chipped, all your money in those chips, and they control the chips, and they control people, and you become a slave, you become a serf.
1931, quote, "There will be, in the next generation or so, a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude, and producing dictatorship without tears, so to speak, producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies, so that people will in fact have their liberties taken away from them, but will rather enjoy it, because they will be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda or brainwashing enhanced by pharmacological methods. And this seems to be the final revolution." Zbigniew Zabrensky worked in the Carter administration, just passed recently. This is from Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technocratic Era, 1970. The technocratic era involves the gradual appearance of more controlled society. Such a society would be dominated by an elite unrestrained by traditional values. Soon it will be possible to assert almost continuous surveillance over every citizen and maintain up-to-date, complete files containing even the most personal information about the citizen. These files will be subject to instantaneous retrieval by the authorities. Shortly, the public will be unable to reason or think for themselves. They will only be able to parrot the information they've been given on the previous night's news. Zbigniew Zabrensky. Chip is loaded with more than 5 billion transistors and boasts more than 250 million synapses or programmable logic points. This is how deep the technology goes. Ray Kurzweil, futurist. By the time we get to the 2040s, we'll be able to multiply human intelligence a billionfold. That will be a profound change that's singular in nature. Computers are going to keep getting smaller and smaller. Ultimately, they will go inside our bodies and brains and make us healthier, make us smarter. And by the 2030s, the non-biological portion of our intelligence will predominate. Ray Kurzweil. Healthcare Act. Obamacare in the 1,000 pages in the U.S. Healthcare Bill is a non-discussed Subtitle C11, Section 2521, National Medical Device Registry, which states its purpose as provides the framework for making the United States the first nation in the world to require each and every one of its citizens to implant in them a radio frequency identification microchip for the purpose of controlling who is or who isn't allowed medical care in their country.
And he provides that no one will be able to buy or to sell except the one that has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666.
Anyone who takes the mark is immediately thrown into the lake of fire. There's no grace, there's no mercy. It's just, you got the mark, bam, you're in a lake of fire.
But guess what? The future is now. Not only does this technology already exist, but it's already being developed and implemented at a rapid and accelerated pace as the technological elite finally begin to bridge the gap between our digital and physical identities.
A system touted as a national security necessity is being used to build a database where the biometric identity of millions of Americans will be gathered and stored.
We're meeting with the president in order to formulate legislation that would require every person in the United States of America who is employed to carry a biometric identification card with them.
And he calls it all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads.
To understand where this technology is headed, all you have to do is basically empty out your pockets. Eventually, developers want to replace everything that's in your wallet, your ID, your credit cards, the keys to your car, even one day, your passport.
This is non-GPSable. However, there is just as much interest from parents with young kids that want to be able to implant their children with a GPS chip.
While now it's just buying snacks and opening doors, the opportunities are truly endless for this controversial chip.
We're going to be responsible. We're going to be respectful with what we're going to do.
And developers are already working on new applications for these chips as we speak. One of them told me to come back tomorrow, and he'd be able to program the chip to turn on the lights and play music. Another developer said someday it could be used by doctors to just scan your hand, and your complete medical history would be available to them.
Biometric IDs to get on the airplane. Soon there's going to be vaccines. So we're going to have to be making choices. But the reason I'm doing this is because I want it to be informed choices of where we can go to and what we need to prepare for. So this has been going on for a very long time. That was 1966. And getting back to our controlling government, as I said, the silent weapons for quiet wars, it's the soft power being used from TV programming to vaccinations to fluoride in drinking water, and aerosol spraying of our skies might be used in the silent kill for control and depopulation of the planet. There will be 13 regional zones within the former U.S. under North American Union, which will include Canada and Mexico. That's when they tried to come out with the Amero back in 2008 under a currency called the Amero. Just like the European Union will also be the Indo-Asia Union. This is their long-term strategies and plans, folks. And then they document it with all the Agenda 21, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the Codex Alimentarius, and all the rest. And then here's one more quote I want to read before we move on. This is from Andrew Gavin Marshall, The Global Economic Crisis, the Great Depression of the 21st Century. There is a transitional ruling class, a superclass that agrees on establishing a world government. They already have a world government, so I disagree with that. Your debt follows you everywhere in the world. We're under a one world financial government. Why aren't we under a one world rest of the government? The middle class is targeted for elimination because most of the world has no middle class, and to fully integrate and internationalize a middle class would require industrialization and development in Africa and certain places in Asia and Latin America. The goal of the superclass is not to lose their wealth and power to a transitional middle class, but rather to extinguish the notion of a middle class and transitionalize a lower, uneducated, labor-orientated class through which they will secure ultimate wealth and power. Look what's happening in the middle class in the United States with massive student debt, massive prime card debt, massive home debt. Everybody's in massive debt. They're getting rid of the middle class, folks. That's what this is saying. Quote, the global economic crisis serves these ends as whatever remaining wealth of the middle class holds is in the process of being eliminated, and as the crisis progresses, the middle classes of the world will suffer, while a great percentage of lower classes on the world, poverty-stricken even prior to the crisis, will suffer the greatest, most probably leading to a massive reduction in population levels, particularly in the undeveloped or third world states. Well, I think it's going to happen to everybody. But anyway, so Agenda 21, I'll put this in the show notes. Here's the biodiversity plan to move everybody off the rurals and into the cities, stack them and pack them. United Nations is behind all this. But here's Agenda 21. Here's their implementation chart. And you can see how much they're progressing along their scale. I highly recommend this book, Behind the Green Mask by Rosa Koire, if you want to understand more about their long-term agendas and plans. The weather's going to make a difference in this all, and they're controlling it. So anyway, it's just, I wanted to bring this to your awareness, but I wanted to move on and just talk about more of the society, what's happening. Here we see that sperm counts in the West are plunging by 60%, July 25th. This is due to the epicite Monsanto that just merged with Bayer Pharmaceuticals for the pharmacology company from hell. Epicite was bought. It's a spermicide, reducing cell count, cell phones. All the silent weapons they talked about for quiet wars in 1966 is being implemented. We can see it going on.
For one example of many, in 2001, a small California biotech company called Epicite patented a product, patented a gene, which causes both men and women who eat it, in the form of any product, to produce antibodies to sperm. If the men eat the epicyte gene, they produce antibodies to their own sperm, rendering them irreversibly sterile. If women eat the epicyte gene, when they have intercourse, their bodies produce antibodies to the sperm that has been deposited, and they become infertile through the destruction of the sperm. Now, DuPont and Monsanto formed a joint venture, purchased the epicyte firm, and, quote, commercialized the epicyte gene. Do you want to know if the food that you're eating contains the epicyte gene? Sure you do. How about the food that your children are eating, or your grandchildren? Sure you do. But the FDA, the Fraud and Death Administration, has made sure that under current laws, it is illegal for you to have that information.
It's good to be here. My name is Steve Hoffman, but in Silicon Valley they call me Captain Hoff. That is my nickname. I am the captain of Founderspace, and Founderspace is an incubator and accelerator. It went black. Here we go. Yeah, an incubator and accelerator that works all over the world. So I spend 70% of my time traveling the globe looking at new technology. We have over 50 partners in 22 countries. And Founderspace has been rated by Forbes magazine as the #1 accelerator for overseas startups in Silicon Valley. We have had many famous startups in our co-working space, Soma Central, like Instagram, AngelList, Foursquare, and today I'm going to talk about some of the technologies that most fascinate me. So, technologies are the future of the brain, our human brain, and where it is headed with technology. So if we examine our brain, we will realize that for over 100,000 years, our brain has remained the same. But the world around us has changed radically. So think about it. We have the same brain as a prehistoric cave person, as a Neanderthals, it's the same brain. But the world has totally changed. That is the power of our brain. It's very elastic. It can reprogram itself. But now, we're going to begin to change our brains. And we are doing this with new technology. Now, some of the basic technology out there, EEG, allows you to actually measure your brain waves. And these devices can tell if your concentration levels. They can be used to actually move a cursor on a screen. There are applications for these devices in entertainment. They're working on them for controls for games. In medical, these devices are being used for conditions like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and ADHD, and other conditions. And they're being used for education. They have applications now for children to study. And they measure their concentration levels and can actually change the applications as the children learns. But where we're headed, and let me tell you, 1 minute, is these devices are now capable of actually recording dreams, but not in a very granular way. In a very primitive way, they can actually capture and identify what a person is dreaming. So they have done studies where they've hooked these devices up to a person's head, they've had them dream, they woke them up, and then they asked them to recall memories in their dreams. And they read the patterns of the brain. And then the person goes back to sleep, and if they dream of the same things, they can recognize those patterns. That is just the beginning of where we are headed. Right now, scientists in laboratories around the world are developing brain chips. Now, these are chips that can be inserted into the brain, and they are wireless. And let me show you. They have actually had a monkey that broke its back. So its spinal cord was severed. The monkey was paralyzed from the waist down. But they inserted a chip in the monkey's brain, and then they inserted another chip in its lower spine. And they allowed the brain to communicate with the lower spine. As soon as they did this, the monkey could walk again. That is amazing. Totally amazing. So they could actually transmit the thoughts of the monkey wirelessly to parts of the body. But it gets even more amazing than that. So they now have, in a laboratory, monkeys with chips in their brain. And then they have an electric wheelchair. And just by thinking, just with the thought of the monkey, they can drive the wheelchair around. Think about that. If a monkey can do that, what could you do if you had that chip in your brain? They have also done experiments with monkeys with a chip in their brain and a robotic arm. And the monkey, just by thinking, can reach out and grab something like food and feed itself. That is amazing if you think about it. So the monkey's thoughts are actually able to control things outside their body. So when we start to think about the future, about where technology is headed, this is where we're going. We will have brain chips in humans. And the people who will get those brain chips first are people who suffer from severe medical conditions. So if you have a severe medical condition, like you're paralyzed from the neck down, or you suffer a brain disorder like Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease, and that brain chip can restore your quality of life, would you hesitate to get the chip? No, of course not. You would say, put the chip in my brain. So that is starting right now, these experiments. And even more interesting, scientists have done experiments with rats, and they have chips in the rat's brain. And what they did was they taught a rat how to do certain things. And when the rat did all these complex things, it could get food. Now, it took the rat weeks to learn that. Weeks. But then they hooked the rat's brain chip to the internet. And they had another rat in another city. And instantly they connected those two rats' brains. And do you know what happened? The other rat knew how to get the food right away. It didn't have to learn anything. The knowledge was transferred from one brain of a living animal to another brain. That is amazing. That opens up a world of possibilities, because if they can do that in rats today, imagine 10 years from now what they can do in humans. And we will go there. So, mind-to-mind communication. This is something of science fiction that we all read about. But this is actually possible today, as I just showed you. So there will come a point where if we have a chip in our brain, and you out there have a chip in your brain, we can communicate. We can communicate without talking. We can communicate when you're halfway around the world. And we can exchange knowledge. So, if you look at a world where we have these chips that are connected to the internet, all of a sudden, every piece of information on the internet becomes accessible to our minds. Now, when we look back at today and we have to go to Baidu or Google and type it in, that will seem so primitive. Nobody will do that. You will just think, what knowledge do I need? And it will appear there for you to use. But it gets even weirder, stranger, because we will not only be able to transfer knowledge, but we will be able to transfer memories. Now, so you could have an experience like skydiving, and all of a sudden you could transfer that experience to a friend, and all of a sudden they have experienced what you have experienced. It gets even weirder, because we will be living our lives as our lives. We know our lives and our memories, but you will all of a sudden have access to anybody's life who wants to make it available to you. People will open source their lives so others can download pieces of their lives and experience those things. That will be really strange. We won't know the difference between our own memory and a memory we acquired from someone else. Think about that. It gets even stranger. So, all of us are here learning at SEEBS, right? Getting EMBAs and MBAs. Well, this will be obsolete, because SEEBS will literally be in the cloud. And you will just download from all the best minds in the world whatever you need to know when you need to know it. Our brains we will no longer have universities as we have them today. That will change. Information will be on demand. Information will be commoditized. Knowledge will be commoditized. All of us will be smarter, have infinite amounts of storage, and infinite access to information. It will be unheard of. We will no longer be this isolated human being. We will be connected to everything. So, you can imagine not only will we be able to get knowledge, but we can actually have full experiences in our head. So right now we have these clunky VR units that we have to put on. But in the future, you can just download a whole environment and actually live in it. And all of you might think, this is not real. But do you know, every night when you dream, those dreams are real. No matter how fantastic your dreams are, they are real. You feel like you're really there. Our brains have that capability already built in. All it takes is the technology to stimulate and transfer the right images in our brain, so our brain creates them, and then we will live like the difference between us dreaming and reality will be blurred. We will be spending a lot of time outside our bodies. So, think about this. You, as a human being right now, are trapped in this body. But once you are connected to the internet, you are no longer trapped in your body. You can actually be anywhere at any time that any other person or any other device is getting sensory information. So there could be a robot on Mars, and you could literally tap into the robot on Mars, and it would be like you're on Mars. It could totally recreate the experience, including the sensations, the physical sensations, like everything of you being on Mars. You can live through other people, your favorite pop star, your favorite scientist. You could be in Elon Musk's head right now, walking around doing what he's doing, if Elon Musk allowed you to do that. It gets so strange because our senses now, we have our 5 senses of our body. But suddenly, if we are connected to a world of intelligent machines and intelligent sensors all over, we will no longer have 5 senses. We will have access to hundreds of sensory input. Infrared, right? All these UV, all these different types of senses that we never even experienced before. It will radically change how we perceive existence. So if you start to go down this path, you see we won't even be, our life today will be totally alien to us. We will be living in a whole nother reality that is blending information, sensory information, data information, memories, all of this from all around the world in this vast internet. And that will and can happen. So let's go even further. Experiencing other lives. So all of us experience things in our life. But now we will be able to have many lives. You can have many lives because you can access other people in other places and live through them. And if you want to think about this, it can be almost like heaven. Why do I say this? Because if you study every major religion in the world, every religion, Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, what those religions promise us is that we will escape our bodies in the future. We will go to some heaven or nirvana or a state of non-being or a state of inclusiveness with everybody. No longer will we and our consciousness be confined to our bodies as an individual. In fact, if you look at us right now as a human being, if I feel pain, if I'm in pain, nobody else can feel the pain I feel. If you're in pain, I can't feel your pain. I can feel sorry for you, I can empathize with you, but I cannot feel your pain. But in this world, we will actually be able to feel the emotions of other people. You can actually not just transfer data and sensory information, but emotions. I would know your pain, you would know our pain, and human beings would never be alone. So, we will come to a point where we, as gods, like gods, will be creating our own reality. We will be redefining what the human experience is for the first time in history. This can happen, and it will happen, but what we want to think about is this. Technology is really powerful. The internet, being connected, is really powerful, but we've already seen in a very primitive way, just with our cell phones, these primitive devices, how it can totally change our life. Like all of our lives are changed by WeChat. All of our lives are changed by the internet. Well, we are embarking on a path now where we will become the internet. The internet will become us. They will be inseparable. We'll have our storage and everything else all over the place. And when we do that, we have to understand that this is a big responsibility. It's something we as a society, we as the human race, must think about very, very carefully. Because imagine, people can hack your cell phone now. People can hack your computer, and it can be bad. They can steal your banking information, take all your money. They can steal your identity, but they can't really hurt you. In the future, though, if somebody hacks into your head because it's connected to the internet, they can steal you. They could actually steal you. They can implant memories in your head that you don't have. They could erase memories. They could control you in ways that you wouldn't even know you're being controlled. Is this scary? So I painted on the hand a heaven, but there is also a hell, right? This is heaven and hell. We are on the cusp of this technology that is so powerful and has the potential to so radically transform our lives and our existence, and we have to be very careful about how we do this. We don't want people controlling us. So think about this. Think very carefully. Everybody in this room are very smart people. You're all highly educated. We are going to be making these decisions that lay the groundwork for this technology in our lifetime.
If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out and in the presence of the Lamb.
Researchers are developing sheets of ultra-thin, ultra-flexible electronics that can stick to your body. These electronic skins, or e-skins, can bend when you flex your elbow and twist when you rotate your wrist. Researchers are just beginning to imagine all the medical innovations that could come from these e-skins.
More now of our special coverage here tonight, life in the U.S. in 10 years' time. By that time, there may be all kinds of new ways to safeguard and identify all those things that make each of us unique, our faces, even our fingerprints, even our eyes.
Science fiction 20 years ago, but a biometric reality today.
The technology is based on answering one simple question. Am I who I say I am?
Already, fingerprints and iris scans verify passenger identities at airports. Within 10 years, that technology may be even more widespread. And look for more complex facial recognition programs that scan a crowd of thousands looking for a single terrorist. Today's facial recognition software starts with the eyes. Then it maps out the contours of the face and compares that against a database of millions, a database that's growing by the day. What's next? At the University of Bath in England, researchers predict big changes for consumers.
I think it is possible to free us completely of our wallets and keys using biometric technology, if that's what people want in 10 years' time.
In fact, it's already here. The latest home security locks use fingerprints to control deadbolts. And at the Jewel Osco grocery store in Chicago, some customers pay using their fingerprints. No paper or plastic.
You don't really need anything other than your hand, and you already got that with you.
So will future department stores scan our irises, like in the movie Minority Report, then offer products catered to who we are?
Hello, Mr. Yakamoto. Welcome back to the Gap.
Experts say that technology is here now. The challenge is to safeguard our privacy in a brave new world.
Able to find that individual if that person wanders away. But I certainly would, and I think it's a coming thing. And the problem is that medical technology is so far behind that RFIDs are going to really be the impetus in order for us to get new technology in the medical field that's going to help people improve their quality of care. And that's what it's all about.
And I'm sorry, sir, did you just say you would get one implanted in your arm?
Absolutely, without a doubt. Because of the lack of technology. There 98,000 people died last year because of mistakes in hospitals and clinics across America. And a good share of those mistakes could have been prevented by technology. RFID is at the cutting edge of new technology, is going to help to improve the quality of health and the quality of care for all Americans.
If I could turn to Secretary Thompson, just ask a quick question about your old job. Secretary Thompson, you were quoted last December as saying you have to assume that sometime in the future one of our countries, meaning the larger developed countries, is going to be hit by a bioterrorism attack. I assume you saw an article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday detailing failures, at least thus far, in developing with the U.S. government's help new vaccines and drugs to counter biological threats. And I'm curious to get your reaction to that.
Well, I think the story is somewhat correct. But you got to realize that the United States was starting from nothing.
Eventually, it will be possible to make things that are on a sub-millimeter size scale.
Tiny specks of computer smart dust will form a vast invisible network that can help manage the infrastructure of even the largest city.
Smart cities in the future will take this low power, inexpensive, small technology and basically distribute it everywhere.
But smart dust will also allow buildings and streets to recognize you and respond accordingly.
I think increasingly the environment will respond to who we are and adapt in consequence.
The city will know where you are if you want it to.
Your workplace will know you. Smart dust at the entrance will boot up your computer. And smart dust embedded in the elevator doors will automatically ring your floor.
Smart dust is going to sense the environment and allow us to improve the way that we live our lives.
No matter how we live in the future city, it will be radically different.
Okay, but...
Okay, so wait. So it's really true. So what this means is that becomes my first superpower. I really want this superpower. It means that my arms are like wires, my hands are like alligator clips. When I touch my phone, my computer, my door, my car, I'm authenticated in. First superpower. Like, I want that.
So we're not shipping that right away.
Yeah, no. We're not shipping that right away. But it sounds like...
This is FDA cleared?
So here's the thing. This is not science fiction. This pill was actually made by a company called Proteus. And they've developed it for medical applications. That pill has been CE stamped and cleared by the FDA. You can take 30 of those per day for the rest of your life.
And then what happens? Does your heart
Nothing.
beat change? Does your...
We can just tell that you've taken the pill.
You will find quite soon that electrical signals start to be picked up by the chips. The brain cells connect not only to the chips, but they also start to put out feelers to each other. They connect to each other, they connect to the chip. You get a biodigital device. I'm telling you history, my friends. You tell me the future. These devices have been grown for the last 5 to 10 years. So could we have a human brain that can go online? This is history. We already did it in animals. We have rats and mice that can think electrically. They produce currents and thoughts which go from one mouse to another. The mouse says, I'm thirsty, and a signal electronically goes to another mouse in another laboratory saying, please, can you give me a drink? If the other mouse agrees to give the first mouse a drink, he gets some food. We are living in a strange world. I am not saying that you're going to have a plug-in module for mathematics in the future or language. I'm just saying we are entering new territory for the future.
Inside the brain, here are human nerve cells growing onto the surface of an RFID type chip. Human brain cells don't need to be taught to do this. They are genetically programmed to work with computers. In fact, they love computers. Here's an example. Here is a chip. There's the chip. You put the brain tissue on and it organizes itself. The brain cells work their way in and they start communicating with each other and with the brain of the PC. So it means we can have thinking computers. Maybe 10 trillion of these devices every few years entering the environment. You're talking about total knowledge of consumer behavior watched in real time and huge business opportunities. Why? Because it means we can then start to predict human behavior.
There's a kind of an idea of how widespread this problem is in terms of numbers in our country and compared to maybe overseas.
Well, I would say that the persons who have realized what's going on are just a drop in the bucket. The persons whom I have seen being targeted are completely unaware of what's happening. So those who are complaining of this are, as I said, a tip of the iceberg. I would say this is probably very, very widespread. But I can't, under the circumstances, come up with any figures. Many thousands, no doubt, are involved. But I would say that the bulk of those are running to their doctors and taking totally unnecessary prescription drugs to cure ailments that, in fact, don't exist.
After a government protocol now applied to the general civilian population?
It's difficult to pinpoint everything at this stage on the U.S. government exclusively because these are global operations.
Okay.
The pattern, the protocols are virtually identical on a global scale. So someone is overseeing the entire activity. The government obviously is complicit because otherwise these operations would not be allowed to exist. Congress recognizes that these weapons systems exist and funds them and knows as a result of appropriate briefings what the bioeffects can be, yet they have passed no legislation prohibiting their use under unconstrained experimental circumstances. That's number one. Number two, given that these systems draw on existing power grids, it would be necessary for the FCC as a minimum and the Department of Energy as a minimum to have some oversight and control over what is going on. So obviously, with Congress, the FDA, and the Department of Energy, the FCC and the Department of Energy are knowledgeable and yet unwilling to do anything about it. So there is complicity, but the question is, whose bidding is the U.S. government allowing these operations to take place?
first of all,
Are you an EPA representative?
I'm a federal agent that works for the EPA.
I have yet to hear any response back to any of my formally filed complaints.
Where's the location that the crime was occurring?
Earth. All over Earth. I mean, I personally witness in Virginia, Georgia, California, Florida, most of the United States, overseas, everywhere.
What's the crime, ma'am?
The crime is airplane pollution, which is
okay.
Which is saturating the environment, and it is detrimental. They're blocking out the sun. I have lab results, hair samples, water, soil, and blood showing high levels of strontium, aluminum, barium, mercury, lead, uranium, and other chemicals and heavy metals. Do you have a criminal division I can formally report this to?
Yes, ma'am. I actually work for the criminal division, but I'm trying to figure out what the crime actually is.
The crime is toxic aerosol spraying into the environment.
We never got to the point where if you mentioned something about a religious group that may be targeted.
Well,
and what did you mean by that?
The way, let me put it this way, I'm not anxious to start a religious war. I have found over the years that the persons involved, both in gang stalking, I've made it a point to get to know these people. I've had to necessarily. I'm not the type to...
You're talking about the perpetrators or the targets?
Perpetrators.
Okay.
As well as I've been drawing distinctions. And what I have found is that the perpetrators appear to belong predominantly to one particular religion, whereas the targeted individuals do not belong predominantly to that particular religion.
And what is the particular religion of the perpetrators?
Right. So at this stage, again, I'm not particularly enthused about the idea of starting a religious war, and I have challenged other...
Maybe.
There is a religious influence, but